Milk, animal milk, healthy food, staple food, or underestimated risk? What really happens in your body when you consume milk or dairy products? The answer might really surprise you. Milk is still considered a staple food, but in reality, it is a strong biological signal for growth, and that's exactly the problem. Because what makes perfect sense in the body of an infant can cause real problems in the body of an adult. Milk is made for growth, but not for us adults. When a calf is born, it needs to gain a huge amount of weight within just a few weeks. And this animal milk provides highly concentrated protein, bioactive peptides, hormones, and the growth factor IGF-1. It's called insulin-like growth factor 1. The calf grows just as nature intended and much faster than a baby does, and that's why we need to be cautious. Because the composition of cow's milk is completely different from that of breast milk. But what happens when we, as adults, regularly consume milk or dairy products or eat cheese? We are constantly sending a signal to our bodies, and that is grow. But in adulthood, growth no longer means that we get taller, but rather that cells divide. And unfortunately, that also includes cells we don't want to see grow. Fat cells, inflammatory cells, and sometimes even tumors. Unexpected cells, meaning cancer cells. And now back to IGF-1. That's actually the secret turbo switch in the body, which on one hand is a super fascinating molecule, but at the same time also a risk. There's only a small amount of it in milk itself, and even less in pasteurized milk or in products made from it. But the mix of nutrients in animal milk activates our body's own IGF-1 production. And that's where the danger lies, because it promotes cell division and inhibits programmed cell death. So when cells are no longer healthy, they die. That's called apoptosis, and that's inhibited by IGF-1. At the same time, it stimulates growth. Again, that's useful for children and adolescents, but questionable for us adults. And studies clearly show a permanently elevated IGF-1 level in our adult bodies is associated with an increased risk of prostate cancer, breast cancer, and colon cancer. And the important and also alarming thing about this is just the daily consumption of around 200 ml of milk is enough to measurably increase the IGF-1 level in the blood. And cheese has an even stronger effect, especially hard cheese. It contains extremely high amounts of leucine, which is a specific amino acid that additionally activates mTOR. And mTOR is also a growth signal, so it stimulates growth processes in the body even more strongly. On top of that, milk powder shows up in many processed foods and lots of other foods. Growth doesn't automatically mean health, and we need to know that. We often think of growth as something positive, but constant cell division without control is a problem or can become a problem. IGF-1 slows down what our body actually needs, namely self-regulation and controlled cell breakdown, and it promotes what we don't need. Excessive fat cell formation, tendency toward insulin resistance, inflammatory processes, and also the continued survival of abnormal cells. And what about the supposed protection against colon cancer? Now I hear you saying, for example, but I've heard that milk protects me from colon cancer. Yes, that's a really interesting aspect, because studies actually show that calcium, which is found in milk, can bind bile acids in the intestine and thus neutralize potentially carcinogenic substances. Fermented dairy products like yogurt or quark also have a mild anti-inflammatory effect, but only in people with a healthy intestinal lining, and this is exactly where the crux lies. What if your gut barrier is already weakened? Maybe because of too little fiber, because of medication, processed foods, or antibiotics. Then IGF-1 isn't protective, it's more of a risk, an accelerant. Because with a damaged intestinal lining, IGF-1 promotes uncontrolled cell division. And in the worst case, that can promote the development or progression of colon cancer. So it's not milk that protects, but a healthy gut that protects, which dairy products are particularly problematic now. When we talk about the strongest activators of IGF-1, it's hard cheese, especially aged hard cheese, and concentrated milk powder. In bars, in snacks, in ready-made meals, in whole milk, even in moderate amounts. Also whey. And as we know, whey is contained in whey protein shakes. The effect on IGF-1 levels is scientifically proven, and it doesn't just affect high-performance athletes, but every one of us. And that's why, as a doctor, I clearly say that dairy products are not suitable for adults. I'm convinced that nature intended for adult mammals not to drink milk, and certainly not from another species. And what do? We drink milk, eat yogurt, butter, cheese, milk powder, and quark. Daily, often several times. And every time we consume it, we trigger a hormonal reaction that affects our entire biological balance. We constantly stimulate growth signals, and we throw our hormonal balance out of sync. And we also increase our risk for many chronic diseases, from acne to diabetes to cancer. And that's even though we don't actually need dairy products for our health. You can get calcium from kale, broccoli, sesame, and almonds. And you get protein from legumes, nuts, and seeds, and all that without IGF-1 stress. My conclusion for you, if you really want to understand how to keep your body healthy, then don't just look at what we've always done. Instead, also ask yourself what actually makes sense biologically, and what is logical, and what is species appropriate, and what really suits my body, and what aligns with what I want to preserve. For me, the answer is very clear. Dairy products do not belong in an adult's diet, not for dogmatic reasons, but because science shows us what they can do to us in the long run. What is your opinion about dairy products, and how much milk do you consume in a day? And of course, it would be incredibly important to share this video. I'm sure that many people will be happy to receive this information.